welcome to Hardtalk India. A spate of newspaper reports in recent weeks suggests that the communist government in Bengal may be changing its colours. But is that really the case? And if it is, then how does the Communist Party in Delhi regard the situation? With me to answer that question is a man that many consider the future General Secretary of the Communist Party Marxist, Senior Politburo member Prakash Karat. Mr. Karat, in the last 2.5 years since the state elections in Bengal in 2001, your government seems to be reversing most of the left's traditional policies. Is that deliberate, or is that happening behind your back?
No, actually it's a conscious policy in the sense that we implemented land reforms and instituted the panchayat system in the rural areas, which ensured agricultural growth and rural development. And now we are turning our face to the urban areas, to industry, to generate more employment through new investments.
But hang on a moment, you said it was a deliberate decision, a conscious policy to reverse earlier decisions and policies taken by your own government?
Not exactly reverse, conscious decision to build upon earlier policies. We have taken some new initiatives, but those initiatives would require more investment, mainly from the private sector.
But you're not building upon, you are actually reversing. Let's look, for instance, at your industrial policy. 14 public sector units have been earmarked for shutting down, 2 of which, Sundarban Sugar Beet and Indian Paper Pulp, have actually been closed. Now, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, your government would have been taking over such sick industries. Today, you're shutting them down. That's a reversal.
No, for the last 10 years, we have been trying to restructure the public sector in West Bengal. The difference between our policies and the policies of the central government is that we do not shut down any profitable public sector undertaking run by the state. The 6 or 7 units which we have earmarked for closing down...
14.
The first phase, 6-7 units are being closed down. I know the numbers. We have discussed this at the party level in Delhi. It's not a West Bengal decision. Is those units which have no possibilities of production or revival.
Except for the fact that one of them, Indian Paper Pulp, was acquired by you when it went into liquidation in 1993. At that point, if you had left it, you would have saved money. But you acquired it, you tried to run it, you made absolutely no money, and today you're admitting that you failed.
Yeah, but as far as the public sector undertakings are concerned, I want to make it clear that any public sector undertaking in West Bengal which is viable or making money, we are not going to sell off or we are not going to close down.
No,
these are totally unviable units.
I'm quarreling with the fact that you call this building upon policies. I'm saying it's a reversal. Let me quote to you what your chief minister has said on the 11th of October about the earlier decision to acquire sick industries. He says it was foolish, mark the word, not just wrong, but foolish for the government to take over private industries which had gone sick. In his mind, he is not just reversing policies, he's undoing past mistakes.
Well, it was not just in West Bengal. All over the country, the government used to take over 6 private sector units. And it was followed in West Bengal also.
In other words, you made the same mistake that the central government was mistaking? You followed in their mistaken footsteps?
Yes, we followed the policies which were there prevalent because central government used to give backing for the states also to take over private sector units.
So because they gave you backing to make mistakes, you willingly made mistakes. You're conceding that.
Was not considered a mistake at that time.
Wasn't it? Your chief minister today considers it a mistake.
It was not considered a mistake at that time. Today it is considered a mistake. In fact, the argument is why should we help sick private sector units which have been squeezed dry by private managements, made sick. Why should we be the hospital for sick units?
It's not just that you're reversing policy by shutting down the sort of company that earlier you would have taken over and helped. You're reversing policy by doing something else. Another 10 public sector units have been earmarked to be given over to the private sector. I can tell you the exact details.
I know the exact details.
Communists nationalize, you're privatizing.
No, communists don't just nationalize blindly. In West Bengal, we have to implement the overall economic policies of the center because the center sets the pace. Within that framework,
you are under no compulsion to carry
within
out
that
this
framework, don't give you money anymore for investment in public sector, which they used to do in the past. But the central government used to provide funds for the public sector. Today they say no more funds for the public sector.
And you're not getting...
So we are forced to take a decision. But in that decision...
No, you're not just taking a decision. Forgive me, I know I'm interrupting you, but I'm doing it purposely because
but in that decision, we are not going to... You cannot cite a single instance. Unlike the other state governments run by the BJP or the Congress in this country, there's not going to be a single public sector unit which is running in a reasonably efficient way, and is making profits which will be
You
closed
have
on
very
Bengal.
few public sector units in Bengal that are actually running in a reasonably efficient way. If you have, in fact, even a half a dozen of those, most people would be surprised. Therefore, it's only natural that economic logic would lead you to shut them down. But that is an economic logic you defied for 20 years.
No, it's not economic logic. You will have to run, for example, public transport. You will have to have public services. We do not buy the argument that economic logic means public sector is bad and all private sector is good.
Well, you may not go by that logic, but let me quote to you what your own Chief Minister, Buddhadev Bhattacharya, wrote in the Indian Express on the 1st of October. That's just 8 weeks ago. He said, "It is no longer possible for the state government to develop, upgrade and maintain infrastructure and provide all the civic amenities on its own." He's making it perfectly clear that some of the things
Yes,
you think the government should do, he
is
can't
telling
do.
the people again and again the hard realities, not only of West Bengal, of the country's economic policies. We have there's no difference between what the Chief Minister is saying, his perception, and what we understand the situation.
Except in talking about not being able to do everything on its own, he's using the language of conservatism in Britain, not communism in Bengal. That's a sign of reversal.
Unfortunately, infrastructure, for example, the power sector, we do not want a policy which creates Enrons. In West Bengal, you will not find a single Enron type project being set up.
You see, I'm making
all through the 90s.
I'm making a simple point. I'm saying to you that in Buddhadev Bhattacharya and in the policies he's been following for the last 2.5 years, you have a government that is reversing traditional left policies.
I don't think so.
No, that's what I'm quarreling with, because you insist that it's a continuation. Let me quote again.
Mr. Jyoti Basu used to make similar statements before Chambers of Commerce. The same criticism used to come about the party. The party is different from Mr. Jyoti Basu.
Let me quote what Buddhadev Bhattacharya said to Frontline magazine 15 months ago. He said, "We Marxists are realists. We understand that change is essential to life. There is no point in holding on to a dogma. We shall have to change our policies," mark that word, change our policies according to the reality we face.
What's wrong with that? We're not dogmatic.
So he's changing policies, he's reversing policies, he's giving them up.
Changing policies and reversing policies. For example, we have not reversed policies regarding land reforms, regarding panchayats, regarding maintenance of essential public services.
But you have changed your industrial policy so dramatically that you are today shutting down what you used to support. Today you're privatizing, whereas previously you were an anathema to private investment.
No, there's a difference. We are closing down certain units because they cannot be run. If the private sector would have taken it up, very good, but they won't take it up, so we're closing down. We're outright shutting down.
And look whose support you're taking in closing down units that you can no longer run. You've gone to the Department of Industrial Development of the Government of Britain. Your advisors, Price Waterhouse. Your critics say, suddenly the communists are hand in glove with people who are considered capitalists.
The DFID has decided to fund the package for rehabilitation of the workers of these closed units. We have studied that package closely. It's a standalone package. It has no conditionalities.
But it comes from a country that is not communist. It comes from people that earlier you would have shunned as partners.
No, the workers of the unit you mentioned, the sugar beet unit, for 7 years they have been taking the salary without any production, without jobs, and we have discussed with them. The trade unions have been consulted, and they would like to have alternative employment after retraining.
In fact, you've even implemented, although you don't use that phrase, a form of voluntary retirement scheme. You're calling it an early retirement scheme. You are no longer You're no longer giving people guarantees of jobs for life. You're now paying them to leave their jobs.
This is going to be the best compensation package. We have studied it at the level of the Politburo, and we are prepared to defend it publicly all over the country to all the working class and trade union organizations.
Note the pride in your voice. You're actually following capitalist policies better than the capitalists themselves. You're saying that this is going to be the best compensation package. You're outdoing others at that game.
No, we are not going to be on the defensive that we have built socialism in the past in West Bengal and we are reversing those policies. There's no socialism. There's only capitalism. There's a lot of bad capitalism in West Bengal. We hope to wind up some of that and bring in some healthy capitalism.
I can't believe what I'm hearing. You are hoping to bring in healthy capitalism.
Yes.
A communist party is going to bring in capitalism. You now accept that.
Last 26 years, what else have we been doing in West Bengal? Do you think we have been building socialism? Mr. Jyoti Basu has made this very clear in the last 24 years of his tenure, that we have a democratic program which hopes to bring about some serious reforms within the existing capitalist system in
Let
India.
me quote to you what your party manifesto in 1990 said. At the time in 1999, you accused the BJP of abandoning whatever little pretension of Swadeshi it claimed and opening all sectors of the economy to foreign capital. Today, your chief minister is talking to IBM in America, Mitsubishi in Japan, and to the Chamber of Trade and Commerce in Singapore. He no longer cares about foreign capital. He brings it all in. All he says is, come to my state instead.
Yes. We are
So you're reversing 1999
no,
and the manifesto.
In 1997, our central committee of the party adopted a new industrial policy resolution for West Bengal. And Mr. Bhattacharya is precisely implementing that you set your priorities in West Bengal. West Bengal is today not industrializing purely by foreign capital, but we definitely like foreign capital in those sectors where we don't have the knowledge or the technology.
Mr. Karat, a moment ago I quoted to you what Basudev Bhattacharya had written, Buddhadev Bhattacharya had written himself in October in the Indian Express, where he said that the state can't do everything. Let me now tell you what his new call is. He's calling for a public-private partnership to develop infrastructure, to develop roads and bridges, to develop housing, water, even to clear up garbage. In other words, he's expanding the role of private enterprise whilst shrinking the role of the communist government.
Because in a state government in India, with the policies pursued by the center, no state government can implement totally alternative economic policies. This we realize not now. Mr. Buddhadev Bhattacharya is not bringing in anything new. It was realized in 1977 when we formed the government in West Bengal.
For 20 years before he became chief minister, your image in the country, particularly amongst investment houses and industrialists, was that you were defiant to change, that you did not want investment, that you weren't concerned about industrial growth. All of that has now been given up, and you say it's not a reversal?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No,
So
I
there's
think
a bit of
that
doubt.
what we have achieved in West Bengal in terms of agricultural growth, in terms of land reforms, in terms of expansion of education, all this is not due to blind pursuit of capitalist policies.
You know, you say this, but listen to Buddhadev Bhattacharya.
No,
If you ask him what are you doing, he says,
I think that you're
am
quoting
correcting.
from the economic newspapers whenever he addresses forums like the Confederation of Indian Industry.
I'm quoting.
I think that you are...
So he says selective things in economic forums to Indian industry that he thinks he wants them
When
to
he
hear.
talks about inviting foreign
Are you
capital,
saying he
obviously
has
do it there.
Are you
But
saying
he's
he
talking
has
about other
two
things also.
voices? He has one thing to say to industry and something else to
He
say
has
to his
many
own
voices.
party.
He is talking to the peasantry, he's talking to the employees, he's talking to the students, he's talking to different people.
Then let me-
So all the quotations you've given me is at the forums of business and chambers of commerce.
Then let me quote to you again from what he says to newspapers. Asked what he was doing, he said, I am correcting the mistakes of the past. Asked what are those mistakes, he said, and I quote, the mistake was discouraging the private sector with the wrong idea that the government will construct, the government will run industries, the government will do everything. Now we are changing, reversing
The government cannot
that.
do everything.
Now we are changing, reversing that.
If we thought the government could do everything...
You did. You tried for
we
20
tried.
years.
No, not 20 years. I'm talking about an outlook which is not confined to West Bengal. It is an outlook which is not confined to the Marxists or the communists. It was an outlook which is shared in this country by large sections of people that the government can do everything. And the government has to do certain
So
things.
you were victims
and
of
we are
the
not
same...
going to accept.
You were victims of the same
We are
grand
not
folly and
going
the same
to
malaise
accept
that
any
affected Indian
neoliberal
politics.
policies. You mentioned Britain. Britain is run by a government, a Labour government. The government in Britain can implement policies. The West Bengal government has no such powers. It's only the central
You
government
know,
in
the
India.
biggest element of change and reversal, it's not the change of policy. It's the personality of your chief minister. Look at him for a moment at his thinking. When he's asked about what has changed in Calcutta, what does he identify? He says, world-class hotels, fancy shopping centers, big, large, spanking commercial establishments. That's not the language of a communist. That's the language of a
I
social
think any
democrat.
Chinese Communist Party leader would use the same language. He's talking about urban development. He's talking about growth in the urban areas which has not been possible. We had our priorities in the rural areas and now we are turning our face to the urban
In
areas.
which case, how do you account for the fact that on measures to handle terrorism and measures to handle crime, His views are a lot closer to those of Mr. Advani than they are to his own party. After all, when you were opposing the centre's attempt to pass POTA in Delhi, he was proposing something equally stringent called POCA in Bengal.
No, we have studied that bill in West Bengal. It has nothing common with POTA. There was no preventive detention. None of the stringent provisions in POTA were there.
You stopped him tabling that bill because you were embarrassed by the comparison
We
to
didn't
POTA.
want an ordinance. That is all. We said take it to the assembly so that we will not be charged of smuggling in any measure by passing legislation.
And have you forgotten Mr. Bhattacharya's
It was to be an
views?
ordinance.
Have you forgotten Mr. Bhattacharya's views about madrasas? He has the same distrust and distaste of them as Mr. Advani does.
I can tell you that the ordinance or the bill you talked about was discussed in our party. It would have gone to the assembly because in the left front other parties did not agree with it. We had to hold it in abeyance. Our party did not stop it.
You stomped on the bill because it embarrassed you, because you suddenly became aware that your
As far
chief
as
minister
terrorism is
sounded like
concerned,
a clone of Mr. Advani on the subject of
Much
terrorism.
before the BJP came to power in Delhi, we have been fighting terrorism in Tripura. Every day we are faced with terrorist attacks. We have been facing terrorism, but we do not share the definition of terrorism of the BJP government.
What about the views that Mr. Bhattacharya holds about madrasas? He has the same distaste for them and the same distrust of them as Mr. Advani.
It's a completely distorted report because
Is it?
in West Bengal,
Is it? Because then why
there
does
is a
your
madrasa
agriculture
board.
minister, why does your agriculture minister Kamal Guha call Buddhadev Bhattacharya a disciple of Mr. Advani?
No, because there is a state madrasa board. We have been asking all madrasas to register themselves with the state board so that the syllabi in the madrasas can be modernized.
If it's as simple and easy as that, then why does your agriculture minister Kamal Guha call his own chief
Mr.
minister
Kamal
a
Guha has a
disciple of
whole
Advani?
range of criticisms about the CPIM's policies. He belongs to another party, so he's free to air those criticisms.
When was the last time that a communist wrote letters to a BJP minister congratulating him? Because that's exactly what Buddhadev Bhattacharya did to
I'm afraid there
Arun
is a
Jaitley
thing
after
called
Cancun.
we had good relations, bad relations with the central government, whether they were in the Congress or the BJP. I don't think that should come into the picture.
Jyoti Basu never wrote letters to anyone congratulating them, yet Buddhadev Bhattacharya has been doing that.
A number of
consistently.
letters to Mrs. Gandhi were written.
That was almost 19 years ago.
Well, that's when Jyoti Basu was also the chief
Except that
minister.
Buddhadev Bhattacharya is writing letters to the BJP, a party that you consider an anathema. That's the sort of
So
reversal
writing
of
letters
change
to
I'm talking about.
BJP, there are policy matters on which we will work with the centre if we are in agreement with that. If we are not in agreement with that, the state government will take it up with the central
So
government.
your bottom line is that this is not a reversal, this is a continuation. Even if to everyone else it looks like a huge U-turn, you're saying this U-turn is simply part of the road.
Because West Bengal has a long border with Bangladesh. It's an international border. If you do not work with the Home Ministry in tackling the problems on that border, I don't think how the West Bengal government can fulfill its responsibilities.
So when people turn around and say that your government has reversed everything that the left traditionally stood for, you're simply saying that's bunkum.
It's not because of bunkum. We have changed certain policies. We have reviewed certain policies, but we have not given up or reversed some of our basic orientation in West Bengal.
All right, let's live with the euphemism you've changed and that you've reviewed.
Okay.
Let's not insist that you've done anything that's a reversal, because that's obviously embarrassing for you to accept. Let's switch instead to the situation that you face at the centre.
Yes.
If after the next elections, and they could be within 2 or 3 months, it looks as if the only way to keep the BJP out is to support Sonia Gandhi as Prime Minister, would you be prepared to do that, or would you seek to create another third front instead?
Well, I think first we have to decide our election tactics for the Lok Sabha elections. We have not done that yet. We don't think elections are coming in 2 months' time. Far from it. And
You're not worried about a February-March election?
No, I don't think so. I think there will be these 4 assembly elections, then there will be the Andhra Pradesh assembly elections, and I don't think the BJP will go in for an early election. But apart from that, we have decided that we'll wait for the results of these 4 assembly elections before we decide on our election tactics for the Lok Sabha.
Which way is the ball bouncing? Towards supporting a Sonia-led government or towards another third
Let
front?
me put it this way. As far as the elections are concerned, the CPIM will not have an alliance with the Congress party at the national level, but the CPIM will work out suitable tactics to direct our main fire against the BJP.
If Sonia Gandhi's Congress party emerges as the single largest party but short of a majority on its own, will you pledge your support to help bring Sonia to power as Prime Minister?
Well, I think it's premature to say what will be the lineup after the elections, but I can make one thing clear on behalf of my party, that we will, after the elections, in the eventuality of a situation where a non-BJP government is possible, we will do everything to see such a government comes, whoever is heading that government.
The critical question is, given the complexity and the size and the complicated nature of the country, do you think Sonia has the capability and the understanding to run India?
I think we look at the, let's pose the question in a different way. Do we see the Congress as a party which can lead a government or which can lead a potential coalition government? Here we have a number of reservations about the Congress as a party and its policies. But if there is a situation where a non-BJP government is possible only with the Congress playing an important role in it, I do not think we shall stand in the way or see it as an obstacle.
When you say it as an obstacle, will you see Sonia, the party? What about Sonia as Prime Minister of that
That's
government?
not relevant for us in our understanding.
So you have no problem with Sonia? I'm not talking about Sonia as a person of foreign origin, but Sonia as a person who has no experience.
We have problems with the policies pursued by the Congress party with Sonia Gandhi as the president. Let me put it that way.
At the moment, it looks as if one of the major problems that Congress is going to face is the possible split in its party in Kerala. If that happens and Karuna Karan manages to take away something like 30 or 34 people, will you support Karuna Karan to form an alternative government?
Firstly, the split in the Congress is taking place because of the inner struggle within that party. The CPIM and the opposition have played no role in this division within the Congress party. But since a division is taking place, it is public knowledge. Openly in the streets, rival factions of the Congress are mobilizing people. We'll soon have to take a position, and we have discussed the matter recently and decided that in the case of a split, and if Mr. Karunakaran goes ahead with a formation of another political group or combination, the LDF, the Left Democratic Front, of which the CPIM is a part, will extend support to that combination, and provided there is some important policy pronouncements or positions announced by this combination.
In addition to important policy pronouncements, is the position of the Muslim League a sticking point for you?
It's the second largest party in the present Congress coalition, and the Muslim League is a party we cannot support in government.
So in other words, if Karuna Karan involves the Muslim League in any government he were to form, you then won't support that government?
I think we have made that public in Kerala already.
Would you be part of the government if the Muslim League were not?
No, we shall support any combination which agrees or which will set out certain important policy statements from outside.
From outside?
Yes.
So in other words, you will support from the outside a 34-person MLA government?
Well, if it has a majority, if the 40 MLAs that we have plus the rest which will come out of the Congress constitute a majority, then there is a possibility of a viable government. We
and what about the damage this will do to opposition unity as a whole? Does that not worry you?
No, there is no front or alliance between all the opposition parties.
Not in Kerala, but you're fracturing the
level.
Congress image nationally at a time when you say that you're committed to removing the BJP government. This is contradictory to that aim.
No, I think that in the whole course of Indian politics, we have seen that most of the allies that the left have had have come out of the Congress. They've broken away from the Congress.
You have no qualms about the fact that at a moment when Congress could be positioning itself to win the next elections, if it wins or does well in the coming 4 assembly seats, that you'll be undermining that positioning.
I think the important thing to note is in Kerala, our support to an alternative government will not help the BJP in any way in Kerala.
So in other words, you're saying it's cost-free?
No, it is that the CPIM is the strongest force against the BJP in Kerala. And whatever we do in Kerala will not be helpful to the BJP.
You're saying that you don't mind undermining the Congress in Kerala because it won't help the BJP?
Nobody has undermined the Congress in Kerala except themselves.
And that's your final position? You're happy to dance on their grave if it suits you, even if in the end that damages opposition unity nationally?
There's going to be another secular combination emerging which we will extend support to.
But this could be the death knell of any hope of replacing the BJP at the centre in 2004?
I don't think so. I think that's an exaggeration because in West Bengal we have been fighting the Congress. The Congress went with the Trinamool Congress, Mamata Banerjee. In Tripura, they recently allied with another extremist party, tried to defeat us. So the battle or the struggle against the Congress policies will go on, but we'll cooperate with the Congress on certain issues.
Prakash Karat, a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you. Thank you.